I'm currently a senior in college, and this story took place during last year. I'm an engineering major, and have taken some pretty difficult classes in recent years. I always study better in the library or classroom than I do in my room, so I would often go find a place to study and get my work done. I remember that this past spring, finals week was approaching, and I had several big projects due, so one Friday night, I decided to go study in a classroom. I know it's not something most people like to do on a Friday night, but I had some plans for the weekend and wanted to get it done beforehand. I went to the engineering hall at about 9 p.m., and when I arrived, it was locked. When this happened, I could call a security guard, and they would unlock the doors for students if you showed them your ID. Then you could use the building to study. I did this, and when the door was unlocked for me, I entered and saw that nobody else was in there. It was strange being in there with all the lights out at night, and I went down one of the first hallways where there were some classrooms, and I entered the first one, which I happened to have a class in, and I turned on the light. Then, I found a desk, sat down, and began working. I got really focused and was getting a lot done. Maybe about an hour passed when I heard footsteps come out of nowhere. I looked up to see the classroom door open and a guy walk in. The man was wearing a red sweatshirt, jeans, and a baseball cap. He stood in the doorway and asked me if I minded if he studied in there as well. I was sort of annoyed by this, because there were plenty of other classrooms he could go to, and nobody else was here. I didn't even know who this guy was. I told him sure though, because I didn't want to seem like a jerk. He had a backpack, and set it down at the first desk in the front of the room. Then he sat down at the desk. I went back to work at my desk, which was more towards the back of the room. I sat at that one, because that was where my seat was in class, and I was just more comfortable there. After several minutes, I glanced up at the guy, and I noticed something strange. His backpack was still on the ground next to his desk, and he hadn't taken anything out of it. He was just sitting there in his desk, staring straight forward, it seemed. He wasn't even on his phone. I went back to work, and over time, looked over to him a few more times, and nothing changed. The guy was just making me uncomfortable, and I was losing my focus. Plus, it was getting late, almost 11 p.m., so I decided I would pack it up and leave. I closed my laptop and put it in my backpack, along with my book. I then got up and walked to the door. As I passed by the other guy in the room, I saw that he was still just sitting there, and I could feel his eyes watching me as I left. I walked down the hall and out to the main entrance of the building. That's when I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. I just knew it was the guy, and he was leaving now. Nobody else had been in there. I was getting suspicious of him, and I picked up my pace in walking. I left the building and went out to my car in the parking lot. When I got outside, I noticed there was just one other car in the parking lot, and sure enough, I saw the guy come out the doors and was headed for the car. I drove off to go back to my apartment. It was only about a 5-minute drive, and I lived just a few blocks outside of campus. I drove there with the guy tailing me in his car. I parked in my parking space and got out to go inside. I noticed that the car the guy was in parked a few spaces away from mine, but the guy stayed inside the car. This made me feel a little better for some reason, although I still didn't know what he was doing. But I went inside my apartment and then went up to my window to watch. I knew the guy didn't live here because there were only 8 units, and I had seen everyone else who lived there over the course of the year. Plus, I had never seen his car before. The guy stayed sitting in his car with the lights on for quite some time. So long that even when I was in bed about to fall asleep, I looked out and saw that he was still there. By then, it had to be about 2 a.m. Eventually, I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up, and when I looked out the window, the guy was not there anymore, thankfully. I went outside, and when I did, I noticed on the outside of my front door, near where the lock was, as well as on the side of the door near where it opened, there were noticeable scratches and small dents that hadn't been there before. I think that guy tried to break into my apartment during the night while I was asleep.